so let's dive right in. Today we're looking at The Departed. You know Martin Scorsese. And I've been going through all the stuff you sent over. This is a YouTube one. I'm really excited to dig into this. Because this movie, it just stays with you.
It really does.
And we're not going to just recap the movie or anything like that. We're going deeper. All the themes and the symbolism.
Yeah.
And really try to unpack why this film, continues to fascinate people.
Yeah, it definitely stays with you. It's more than just a gangster flick. The thing that is just so compelling is how Scorsese uses the crime genre to explore these deeper societal issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to set the scene, I guess, The Departed drops us right into this criminal underworld in Boston, where the line between cops and criminals is so blurred. The source actually describes it as a realistic but cynical portrayal of the city's power dynamics.
And that realism it's really key to understanding why the film is so impactful. Scorsese doesn't shy away from the rain. Gritty details, moral compromises, the sense that everyone is operating kind of in this gray area.
Yeah, I love this phrase the source uses. It says, a glorious show of corruption. It just really captures the atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody is truly innocent in this world. And so against this backdrop of guilt,
this pervasive corruption, we meet the two central figures. Billy Costigan, who's the undercover cop, who's trying to infiltrate the Irish mob, led by Frank Costello. And then we've got Colin Sullivan, who's the mole, working for Costello.
Inside the state police.
Talk about tension.
Right.
These two characters living these double lives, having to constantly question who to trust and what they're even willing to sacrifice.
And I think what's so interesting is how Scorsese visually represents that. Like, think about that parallel editing that he uses, cutting between Billy's, increasingly chaotic life undercover, and then Colin's, carefully constructed facade of respectability. It's really highlighting how both of them are trapped, just in different ways.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. That's a really good point. It really emphasizes how both characters kind of lack agency. They're constantly being pulled in these different directions.
Exactly. And this also ties into this larger theme of class warfare that runs through the film. It's not just a simple cops and robbers story. It's about the socioeconomic layers of Boston and how they can really trap individuals.
So it's not about who's good and who's bad, but the system that creates those roles in the first place.
Exactly. And Billy and Colin represent these opposite sides of this struggle. So Billy, coming from this working class background, he sees infiltrating the mob as a way to escape his roots, almost like he's trying to beat the system at its own game.
Whereas Colin, who grew up surrounded by this, criminal element, he chooses to climb the ladder within that existing power structure.
Yeah.
Even if it means betraying his own community.
Yeah. And this raises this really interesting question about ambition. Is Colin purely driven by self-preservation, or is there this twisted sense of loyalty to Costello and the power that he represents?
It's a good question. And I think it speaks to, the film's moral complexity. There are no easy answers. But the source also points out that Scorsese isn't just focusing on these individuals. He's making a statement about the system. They describe The Departed as Scorsese's love letter to how fucked up it is when power structures give you no way out.
Yeah. And we see that visually, too. Think about the recurring imagery of rats and entrapment. It's constantly reinforcing this idea that everyone is caught in this web of deceit and betrayal.
So even if you try to play the game might end up playing you. Is that
certainly a reading that the film supports. And that leads us to another major theme, which is loyalty, betrayal, and the film's overall sense of nihilism. Yeah, it really doesn't hold back when it comes to exploring those darker sides of human nature, like loyalty and betrayal. Those are constantly at play, and there's just this underlying sense that nobody truly escapes unscathed.
Yeah, the source actually uses the word nihilism to describe the film's outlook. And I got to say, I kind of agree. It's not exactly a feel-good movie.
Yeah, right.
It really makes you question whether anyone can operate with integrity.
Right.
In a system that is so corrupt.
Now nihilistic tone is even further reinforced by the film's ending.
Right.
There's no clear sense of justice prevailing. There's no happy resolution. The system remains intact. And that cycle of violence and corruption continues.
Yeah, I remember the first time I watched it, I was just kind of got it. It's not your typical Hollywood ending.
It's what
is tied up neatly, the good guys win.
Right. But maybe that's what makes it so impactful. It forces us to confront that uncomfortable truth that sometimes, even when quote-unquote bad guys, are brought down. The system itself doesn't change.
That really connects back to that idea of those blurred lines we were talking about earlier. I mean, the film, it deliberately blurs that distinction between the cops.
And the mob. Absolutely. It's not just about, individual characters making good or bad choices. It's about the institutions themselves being morally compromised. So,
is Scorsese making a statement about power itself?
Yeah.
And how it corrupts no matter what side you're on?
Exactly. And the film visually emphasizes this through recurring imagery of surveillance and entrapment. Both Billy and Colin are constantly being watched, manipulated. Their lives are essentially controlled by these forces that are larger than themselves.
And the source points out that Colin's character, he embodies this idea of cynical manipulation of the system. Like, he's not even truly loyal to the mob, who's just using them for his own gain.
Right. Which makes him, arguably, even more dangerous than someone like Costello, who at least operates within, like a defined code of conduct, Colin is, completely amoral, driven purely by ambition and self-preservation.
That's like Scorsese is saying. That unchecked ambition, that willingness to exploit the system for personal gain, that's what ultimately leads to the corruption that we see.
It's just limited to the criminal underworld either. We see echoes of this in the police force as well. This culture of secrecy, the willingness to bend the rules, that sense that the ends justify the means.
Yeah, that's a good point. The film doesn't let the police off the hook at all. It actually highlights the hypocrisy of these institutions that are supposed to uphold justice.
Right. Think about Captain Queenan. He's portrayed as this relatively decent man trying to do the right thing within a corrupt system. But even he makes compromises, turns a blind eye, ultimately perpetuating that cycle.
So even those with good intentions can't get caught up in the web of corruption. That's a bleak message, but it feels relevant.
Absolutely. And that's where The Departed, it really transcends the crime genre. It becomes this powerful commentary on the human condition, on the choices that we make when we're faced with difficult circumstances.
And speaking of choices, the film also explores that theme of class and social mobility. It's not just about crime. It's about the limited options that are available to certain characters based on their background.
Right. Billy's journey is particularly interesting in this regard. He sees infiltrating the mob as his only way out of a dead-end life, his only chance.
And achieve something better.
Even that path
is
fraught with danger.
And ultimately
leads to his demise. It's like the film is saying, that the system is rigged against people like Billy. That even if you try to play by its rules, you're still likely to lose.
That's where the film's bleak worldview really hits home. It challenges us to consider
whether
true change is even possible. It's a system that's deeply flawed. It's interesting how this movie, even with all the blood, darkness and the bleakness, how it still manages to be like so gripping. It's like, you think a story about all this corruption and betrayal would be such a turnoff, but it's like the opposite.
The storytelling, like Scorsese, he knows how to draw you in, make you care about these characters, even when they're making horrible choices. And the performances are just phenomenal. It's this whole other layer to these already complex characters.
Absolutely. Nicholson is Frank Costello. It's just terrifying and charismatic.
But going back to what we were saying about the system, is Scorsese saying that there's no way to break free from this cycle of corruption?
Oh, I think it's a question that the film wants us to think about. It doesn't give us any easy answers, especially with that ending. It's brutal and efficient, and there's just this lack of resolution, and it really underscores that sense of
utility.
I love how the source put it. They say it's Sergio, fuck everything, especially the ending kind of vibe, which I think it's hilarious, but also accurate. You're just left with this lingering sense of unease. Like wondering if anyone can escape the consequences.
But maybe that's the point, to make us confront that question, acknowledge that the world isn't always black and white. That even those who try to do good can get caught in the crossfire.
Instead of giving us this, like, neatly packaged resolution, The Departed throws us back into the real world, makes us figure it out ourselves.
Exactly. And by doing that, I think it elevates the film beyond just a genre exercise. It becomes a mirror to reflect on our own anxieties, power, morality, and the choices that we make within systems that are often flawed.
That's like Scorsese saying, here's the world, now what are you going to do about it?
And that's where the film's power lies. It doesn't offer solutions or these preachy morals. It just invites us to have a dialogue, to question, and to consider the possibility that even in the darkest places, there might be a little flicker of hope.
Hope that maybe we can learn from the mistakes of these characters and try to make a winner. Better world, even if it feels like an uphill battle.
It's definitely a challenging but ultimately rewarding experience, much like this deep dive we had today. I think we've covered a lot, from the film's gritty realism to its exploration of loyalty, betrayal, systemic corruption.
He's also touched on Scorsese's amazing directing, those brilliant performances, and how The Departed uses the crime genre to comment on these big societal issues.
If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend adding it to your watch list. And for those who have, maybe this will inspire a rewatch with a fresh perspective, because The Departed, with all of its layers of meaning and these unsettling questions, it's a film that continues to resonate long after the credits roll.
Yeah, it really shows that. Even Noeda, the darkest stories, there's always something to learn, something to talk about, and something to take away, apply to our own lives. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Departed. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
and you to see deep into stories.